Well, hello again. It's Liam from Unique Cars and Parts, and I'm with Ian and his MGF. And you'll notice that I'm wearing an MG cap, and I know from history that this is Ian's second MGF. He owned one, about 16, 17 years ago, and at the time he bought his MG, they were giving out free caps. I scored one, and I still wear it to this day. Ian, you've got a little bit you can tell us about this particular one?
Well, this particular MGF was bought at auction from Grays Online.
Now I know a bit of the backstory to this, Ian, and I heard that you had your iPad out in one hand and a glass of red wine in the other. Is that right?
Not quite right. I had an iPhone out and I hadn't seen the car before, and I was drinking my second glass of wine and I bid it on the car and ended up winning it. Do you want to know how much it cost?
Well, that was going to be the next question. How much did this beauty cost you?
Well, it was $2,300 plus buyer's premium of about $350, so about $2,650.
What's the buyer's premium?
For the auction house, it's the premium you put on. I think it was 7% of the cost of the car.
So that's what Grays Auctions take off as part of their revenue stream.
That's correct, yeah. So, just a few $100s, or it's a percentage of what you pay for.
So a little under $3,000, and you got it looking like this?
Well, I had to spend a little bit on it. The paintwork wasn't as good, but I just bought some cutters and cleaned up the paintwork. I had to buy some parts for it just to make sure it was looking as best it could. And then I took it to the mechanic and made sure it was roadworthy and got it on the road. And all up, it cost me about $5,500.
So it owes you about $5,000 to $5,500. So you said you had to spend, to my calculations, a little over $2,000 on getting it roadworthy and so on. Are you including in that the cost of the roadworthy and the registration?
Yeah, that's right. The cost of everything was about $5,500, and all the parts I bought. Most of the parts that I bought came from England because it was easy to buy online. They were just things that are broken or were missing from the car.
Can you run over what was broken, what was missing, and what problems you've had with it?
Well, it was missing a spare wheel, which you don't actually need for a roadworthy, but I got a spare wheel which sits in the bonnet, under the bonnet here. It needed a new rear light. It needed some of the plastic trim parts that were missing. I needed an MG radio, so I got an MG radio for it. One of the speakers.
Sorry, you needed it came without a radio?
Yeah, a lot of these cars, they're so old now, they've put in aftermarket radios, and the one, I don't know if you remember those old radios, used to have a front panel to them, and it was missing the front panel when I bought it. So I thought, well, I've got to swap it over, and I was able to source an old MG radio for it.
So it sounds like purely cosmetic things that you needed to do.
Yeah, well, what had to be done from the mechanic side of things, I spent about $1,200 at the mechanics, and what was done was they have a thing called hydrogas suspension. They needed to pump it up, and that cost about $250. They needed to replace a few parts in it and give it a service, and all up it cost about $1,200 to get it ready for
mechanically right.
To get it mechanically right.
So $1,200 on the mechanicals. The rest was just on cosmetics, which was right. A radio.
A radio, some plastic parts that were missing, such as these little things around the windscreen.
Yep.
A rear light that I had to buy for it.
It had a broken tail light, did it?
It had a cracked tail light, so I knew it wouldn't pass the roadworthy. That cost $80. A spare wheel cost $120 for it. An aerial was broken, so I needed to buy an aftermarket aerial to put on it.
So all in all, it's been a pretty cheap restoration and required very little to be done to it.
Yeah, I think I was quite lucky, because when the mechanic rang me, because I was a little concerned, it did have an engine light on when I bought it. And
you knew about that when you were bidding with the glass of wine in your hand?
I did, and I think that was the second glass of wine that got me over the line on that one. But when the mechanic rang me and said, yeah, look, it's fine, it's going to be a good car. And then I had a different mechanic look at it for the roadworthy, and he also said, yep, engine's great. So I was really pleased.
And do you know what sort of engine or what size engine it's got in it?
Yeah, it's a 1.8 litre engine.
Built by Rover?
Morris Garages. That's the same thing, is it?
So you don't really know, but it's a 1.8.
It's a 1.8. Yeah, it's a good little engine in it. Apparently they had problems with, I think it was the gaskets or something, but the mechanic was saying that if you've bought one this age, generally it's been replaced, and then in the later models they fix them anyway. So, and I found out, I did find it did come with a little bit of a service history, and it said it had been replaced. So that was a major expense that I didn't have to face.
And how many kilometres has it got on it now?
About 113,000 kilometres.
113, that's not too many. Now, you had one before, as I alluded to at the start of the interview. That was, from memory, a British Racing Green MGF.
Yeah, that's right.
You bought that brand new. Why did you sell that?
My wife and I were about to become parents, and we just didn't feel it was practical for the baby seat and to fit three of us in the car.
And now it's practical? Or?
Well, not really, but my kids are a little bit older now, and my son enjoys coming with me in it, so it's good. It's a great little car. It's got a decent sized boot, which I can show you if you want to have a look later.
Well, I think we do want to have a look at the boot. Okay, so here we have the boot. It doesn't look particularly big. Now you've got the spare wheel in it.
Well, that's not the boot, that's the bonnet.
Well, yeah, yes, it's the bonnet, but with the engine being mid-mounted, I'm assuming there's no room back there.
Well, there is behind the engine. There's plenty of room.
Okay, so we better take a look at that. So what exactly is this little bit for carrying your spare wheel?
Spare wheel and a little bit of space for anything else you might want to put in there. But as you notice, full-size spare wheel in here.
Full-size spare wheel and enough room for a small water bottle.
Correct, which is very handy when you're going to the gym.
Yes, and that's about dual horns.
Oh, yeah. Important when you drive a sports car.
Very important. Okay, and the battery sits up front as well. Yes. Well, let's take a look at the back of the car. Okay, so here we are at the boot of Ian's MG, and I'm actually quite surprised at the amount of space in here. I think there's enough room for two small suitcases. At a pinch, maybe three. But certainly a lot more space than I thought, and a lot more generous accommodation than's at the front. Obviously here is where the mid-engine is located, and I'm guessing that would be a bit of a mechanic's nightmare to get into.
If you've got the right equipment, it just means they have to access the engine from underneath, and so they have to have a pit where they can get into the engine. The only time I've taken it to the mechanic is when they've got specialist MG people that service these types of cars. But yeah, I think it's pretty standard for mechanics to be able to get into them, but a bit harder than a normal car.
Okay, but just as an enthusiast who might want to check the oil, for example, how would you go about that?
Well, that's a really interesting question because I've never checked the oil on it, because it doesn't burn much oil, this one.
Unlike the A-Bart that I was interviewing somebody a few days back. But I would assume that you do need to check the oil from time to time, and there must be a simple method of doing it.
I think you just lift one of these flaps here. There we go. There it is.
We've just found where the dipstick is. Nice and easy to access, so that's mystery solved. Okay.
So I should point out that this is a Mark II, not a Mark I MGF.
Do you know what the differences were between the Mark II and Mark I?
Just so I asked that question, a leading question, because I did know the answers to that question. The answers are different colour range. So this is the anthracite sort of blacky grey that it came in. They changed the interior a little bit, gave it a 6-speaker stereo. Which is really good, and they also gave it the steering wheel could move up and down, which it wasn't able to before, so to give you a little bit more leg room.
Is it up and down, and does it have reach as well?
No, just up and down.
Okay.
No, they didn't get that advanced in 18 years ago.
Yeah. Keep a lid on it.
They changed the seats. I think they might have changed, a different range of alloy wheels you could get for it. So a few things they fixed up on the Mark II.
I noticed with the seats that they don't have any of the traditional, I guess, British piping on them. They're a two-tone seat, cream and some sort of a red colour, would you describe it? Or
Yeah, sort of. I think they were redder, perhaps when it was new, and they've sort of faded a little bit. But yeah, I think they came out with lots of special editions with these cars, and this was obviously one of those special editions. Oh, they changed the gear, as I said, the fascia for all the switch work and the gear stick and things like that to make it look a bit more contemporary from the older version.
Okay, and what year is this one?
2001.
And so how long did this particular model run for?
I think it ran for about another four years, and then I think they brought out the TF, was the one that came out after that, and then that ran for a couple of years, and then they sold out to the Chinese.
Yeah, that was the last hurrah, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And now if you buy an MG, you're buying a Chinese car.
Yeah.
Is there anything wrong with that?
Well, I don't think they brought out they stopped doing the TFs, and that was the end of their sports car range. But I know that TFs did fix some of the issues that these ones had, or some of the niggling things that people said could be improved on them.
And what were those niggling things?
A lot of people didn't like the hydrogas suspension on them. I find it okay, but it can be a little bit bouncy, especially with Australian roads. That was one thing that they fixed. They changed the front end look a little bit to improve the front end look of it. So it took away the hydrogas, changed the front end. I think they improved the interior again, the quality of the interior a little bit. But that's pretty much, I'm not sure if they changed the engine. I think they did change the engine, so it was a little bit more powerful, the engine.
And what are your long-term plans for the car?
Well, I don't know what I'm going to do with the car. At the moment, I'm enjoying driving it, but it's a fantastic little car, but it also leaves you wanting for more. And
Is that you're talking about it doesn't have enough power?
look, it seems to have it certainly has enough power, but it just maybe a newer car because it's like something when you get something and you really enjoy driving it, and this car to drive is great fun to drive. It makes you thinking that there might be even better cars out there to drive that you might want to go into.
Well, if you've got shares in an oil company, an ABART might be just for you. And finally, is there anything that you're planning to do to improve it before you do trade it in on something else?
Yeah, look, some of the things that I think are not a fault with the car itself, but just a sign of the times where it came with lock nuts on each of the wheels. Like many cars that are 20 years or close to 20 years old, you tend to lose the lock nut for it. So you've got to get a specialist to remove one of the lock nuts from each and just put a standard lock nut on it. So I've got to do that. Otherwise, you can't get the wheels off.
So if you had a flat now, even though you've gone to the trouble of getting a full-size spare, you're telling me that you'd be on the side of the road and wouldn't be able to remove the wheel to change it?
Yeah, I'd be telling you exactly that.
So it'd be a call to the RACV?
Yeah, exactly. That's what the RACV are there for. And I don't think they could remove it either, so it'd be a tow truck.
Well, that's not exactly cheap motoring, is it?
No, but I've been told it's $100 to have it removed, but it grates against me spending $20 a tyre just to get a lock nut removed. But anyway.
I get it, but I think you probably should spend the money.
And that's one thing I want. That's one thing I want to do to it. Otherwise, it's in pretty good condition all around. There's little bits of plastic trim, and these cars, the plastics get a bit brittle after 20 years, so you can very easily break things on it. If there's any little plastic bits, I think it's missing one or two little things that I might replace on it that might be cracked or so on. But apart from that, no, it's in pretty good condition.
Now, when you do go to sell it, you're going to use Unique Cars and Parts Classifieds, which is free and has been since 2001, aren't you?
Who's Unique Cars and Parts?
Me.
I'd definitely be selling it Unique Cars and Parts if it's free. That's
a free service. Okay. Well, look, thank you, Ian.
I want to add one thing. If you're going into little sports cars, this is the car to buy. I mean, this or the MX-5 NA edition is probably the lowest price little sports cars you can buy, and it's a good entry level into buying a little sports car.
Well, look, for under $5,000, I don't think anyone could do any better financially to get something like this. It looks sharp. I love the colour, the paintwork. It might be hard to keep it clean, but certainly, with the sparkle through it looks absolutely fantastic. Look, there's very little I could criticise with it except for the fact that you may be called a hairdresser when you drive it.
And I don't mind that. I haven't got much hair anyway, so...
Well, Ian, thank you for taking the time out of your day to show us your MG. It really does look, for $5,000, I'm blown away. What an incredible buy. I think the styling is held up really well for the age of the vehicle. We're talking something approaching 20 years old now, aren't we?
I think the styling was something that sold. They sold well in England and in Australia, particularly around 97 to 2000, and I think that was because they had a little bit different styling than the MX-5s, which, I mean, the reason they were built, if you know a little bit about their history, is that I think Morris Garages saw the success of the MX-5 NAs and thought, well, we can produce something as well. And it was the MX-5s that probably led to this one being built. They really did. I think it looks best from the rear. The side's pretty good. The front's probably okay. But
the headlights are what lets it down, I think.
Yeah, well, that ages it a little bit, those headlights, which were quite popular at the time. But I think it's a pretty sharp little sports car.
Yeah, well, certainly MG have had much more of a reputation building affordable, cheap, and well-sorted sports cars long before Mazda got into the party, but there's no denying Japanese build quality and reliability. And from what you're telling me, this thing almost matches them.
Well, I'd say the build quality on an MX-5 would be better than this one. You can see it on the interior a little bit. I have a friend that's got an MX-5, but it's not too bad, the build quality in this. The reliability, well, the engine's actually, the 1.8s, once you've got that issue with the gaskets fixed up, I think it's a gasket that's the issue, then apparently they're fine, and I've had no trouble with the engine at all.
Well, look, I am a little bit sad to hear that you're thinking of selling it. I'm glad to hear that you are going to use Unique Cars and Parts to sell it on. But before then, before you do sell it and part with it, I wish you many, many kilometres of enjoyable driving. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to show us your MG. I think it's a great looking little car. And I look forward to you tuning into the YouTube channel.
Thanks, Liam.
Thank you. Hooroo. Bye-bye.